Well, hello again. This is John Miller with Hometown Historian. These are some really nice folks that I just met who told me about a bunch of local history.
They were lucky to get the bell back.
Oh, yeah.
Here it was stolen. It was out of Lake Strauss.
Really?
The guy had it in the yard.
Sheesh.
And then when they started to redo this, he gave it back to him.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And anyhow, of course, he passed away too.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you once again. They had stopped and talked to me about the Monroe Valley Chapel here. They also let me know about there's a really old Moravian cemetery over the hill here. So I might go a quick run over there and check that out. This is the Monroe Valley Chapel. This was actually built, they're not quite sure the exact date, but they think between 1760 and 1800. So this is quite an old structure. This had actually gone into quite a bit of disrepair. I think they even said between 1940 and like 1970s, this was like squatters were living here. And I guess they destroyed a lot. There's a cemetery right over here. It's Moravian, but also this was used as a Lutheran church as well. And in the early 1800s, it was actually used as not only a church, but they sort of partitioned off part of it to be used as a schoolhouse, like a schoolroom. And then at some point they built on the east side of the valley, and then on the west side of the valley they built two schoolhouses, and then this went back to just being solely a chapel. But this had really fallen into disrepair. You know, imagine there's no roof on there. Most of the walls like that had crumbled down, windows and all that stuff, that was all gone. And like the gentleman had said, somebody had actually stolen the bell in the bell tower, which thankfully they wound up giving it back. But yeah, this was in bad shape. I remember going by it as a kid on the school bus and just seeing what horrible disrepair it was in. But thankfully, the property, I think in like 1976, was bought out by Lebanon Preservation Society, but they lacked the funds to be able to take care of it. So Northern Lebanon School District, which is a local school district here, a bunch of teachers, and which actually the gentleman and the lady that had stopped by here, she had been a teacher at Northern Lebanon, so she knew the individual that was most responsible for setting this up. And the students, local tradesmen and craftsmen came together and showed what local community can do to preserve these old structures, and it's our history. And it really is. This is a place of pride for the Monroe Valley. It's a beautiful valley. I always remembered how beautiful this was going through here, and just mountains on either side. Right now there's a light rain coming down. There's a little bit of clouds and fog, if you will, on the mountain over. I guess that might be the Blue Mountain over there, but just a beautiful place. And they said especially in winter, like with the snow, this place is just magnificent. But they actually have Monroe Valley Chapel is available for like weddings and those types of events. But it's also, they have, and I believe the first week of December, they have Christmas services here. I think it's the first, I forget what day of the week it is, but then on a Saturday at like 2 p.m., which with COVID, things might be a little different right now because they probably didn't have the services this last year. But they have those services, and they're really beautiful. Like my dad was like somebody that, he didn't help with the restoration, but this is a place that he loved to go to, and he'd come here every year for the Christmas services. It was taken up by Northern Lebanon and the students and the teachers and the local craftsmen, and it was completed. The restoration was completed in 2002, which they do continue to do, because this is owned by, I think, something with the Lebanon Historical Society County for preservation. So they maintain the property, and they also occasionally they do whatever work needs to be done to preserve the building in any way. But this is, I mean, you think about this is a potentially 260-year-old building. So it's very, very old. It's a beautiful structure. I love the stone. They have a plaque up here. It says Monroe Valley Chapel, original stone structure built in 1841. So apparently it was 1841 when it was built. Served as a community chapel for Lutheran and Reformed congregations. restored 1993 through 2002 by volunteer students and staff from Northern Lebanon High School and community members of the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County. So apparently it was 1841. Excuse me. What I had read on the internet is that it was thought to be much earlier than that, maybe as early as 80 years earlier, but apparently 1841 is when it was built. So still it's a 180-year-old structure, which is impressive because so many of these structures just don't exist anymore, which unfortunately they have the windows there, and I think you could undo the latch there, but I don't want to touch anything because I don't think that you should do that. But the inside is really beautiful. I think there's an old wooden stove in there and everything, and like I said, there is an old, I think originally it's a Moravian cemetery. So there are, I think they said 20 stones that have been identified, but they think there could be as many as 150 graves actually here. It's just, you know, the squatters that were here apparently destroyed most of the cemetery and those types of things. So it's cool. There's even a window in the back here. But yeah, it's just a beautiful, I mean, like you can see there, just the valley along the mountain range and stuff like that. Just the fog, the clouds come down here. This is a beautiful, beautiful area. They used to have a golf course here across the road, and it eventually shut down, but that was a really pretty one here. This is cool. You can actually read this pretty well. Looks like Henry Bixler. 1867 is when he died, and looks like 1801 is when he was born. Yeah, it's weird because you have some of these trees just literally grew around the headstones. Quite a few of these are going to be like field stones where there's just no writing on them. I mean, maybe there was at a time, but they said they felt as well, like some of the research that I did, they talked about that they felt like a number of the people, because this was right up the ways, is the Swatara Gap, which was a major crossing ground and a path that the Indians used to come down through into the areas where settlers were. So it was pretty rough area back in like the French and Indian War days, like 1740s through 1760s and stuff like that. So there's a Fort Swatara that's not that far from here as well. So here's another one. I'm actually impressed with how well these things you can read. It says John and is Jacob something. Looks almost like Schaefer, but it looks like it's 1844, and then can't really tell. It's February something 1870. So I got to remember to bring flashlight with, because a number of people have said that actually helps. But it's just cool. Like some of these stones are, which I would sort of in a way almost assume maybe the church is a little older than 1841, because some of these stones, if you have the stones, are, you know, right around that period, maybe a little earlier. You know, who knows? I mean, we'll go with 1841 because it's on the plaque, but this is pretty neat. They said that like this valley was settled by German immigrants primarily, so a number of them are in German. Got a little kid like yelling in the background somewhere. There's a farm across the street. This one's a little different. Memory of, it almost looks like Priscilla. Looks like it says consort of Elisha Moore. It says supposedly too at this other cemetery that's over the mountain that we're going to go check out, then they said that one actually apparently has somebody pretty famous in it as well. Who that is, I have no idea, because I lived in this area like this. I grew up in Greenpoint, which is not terribly far from here, and I never knew that cemetery existed. I mean, I might have, like when I was a kid, my dad might have talked about it or something like that. I vaguely maybe remember something with that, but it's not familiar. This looks like another Bixler, a Mary Bixler. This one looks a little more German. But yeah, so apparently it's a much larger cemetery than just this area that has the rock wall around it. But unfortunately, people vandalized the thing pretty harshly. But so this is the Monroe Valley Chapel. And it's a great example of what communities can do in preserving history. When you have some people come together and decide that they're not going to allow part of their history to just fall into ruin and disrepair and eventually just be destroyed. Because so many of these buildings, they just tear them down completely and no regard for the extraordinary amount of history. And you know, these places were huge community centers for these areas, especially in that time period. And it's neat to see that this is once again, in a way, it's a community center again. It's being used and it's loved and appreciated, and it is pride of the Monroe Valley. So we will see you in a bit again. Hopefully we can find this cemetery, and then potentially they were talking to me as well, that two folks, about the Bordner cabin, which I want to do that at some point. I know Cliff, the Wandering Woodsman, has done, I think, 2 videos here in the Monroe Valley Chapel, one when he first started his channel and one much more recently. But he's also done several times the Bordner cabin, because it's one of his favorite places. It's a really beautiful cabin. And he's actually, the man that built it was one of my dad's friends, because they were back in the day when they decided they wanted to make this Swatara Dam. They my dad and I think it was Amos Bordner, but I have to look that up, were a major part of the resistance to having the Swatara Dam, because they basically went in to with eminent domain, which means you can basically go in, pay people pennies on the dollar for their property and just take it away from them, and they have no choice. And that's sort of what happened. They made a special deal with Mr. Bordner to and eventually the Boy Scouts took over the property. But you know, it was one of those things, a lot of people, there were some beautiful homes and people's history, a lot of old homes were destroyed, which was a shame. But anyways, this is a place that still stands. This is the Monroe Valley Chapel. They do have a Facebook page. They also have a lot of information on the internet, which apparently some of it isn't right, that it wasn't between 1760 and 1800, but it was actually erected in 1841. So anyways, thank you, and we'll see you about town.